Thank you very much for joining. Hopefully you can see what is on my screen. We're just waiting for Flavian to join, but he can just join into the program when we get there. So we'll do a welcome and introduction to the speakers, and then they will all talk about their experiences of being new parents. We'll have a time for a Q&A, and then some closing thoughts from the speakers and Marie. So thank you so much to our facilitator, Marie Derome. Her new book, What Your Baby Wants You to Know, is out now. She's a psychoanalytic child and adolescent psychotherapist. You can see her website there. And thank you very much to Sareta, Olivia and Flavian. When he gets here, we will introduce them more. And just to bring your attention, I'll put this in the chat. We've got the code of conduct. Please make sure you stick to that. A feedback and demographic data survey, if you wouldn't mind filling that in. And if you're part of LUNZ Hub, we've got our survey coming as well. Please mute when you're not speaking. As I mentioned, it's being recorded. Please contact me if you don't want your question included in the recording. Please use the raised hand function, which Marie will keep an eye on, the chat or the Q&A function to ask questions. The Q&A is anonymous, if that's helpful. And yeah, please do give context to your question if you want to, and address it to a particular person, or just to the group if you're not sure who you would like to answer that. So thank you. I will hand over to Marie.
Hi everyone. So Miranda has introduced me a little bit, but I'll give you a bit more context. So I'm a child and adolescent psychotherapist. I've worked in the NHS for many years and partly left the NHS because being a parent in the NHS wasn't easy. So I've been now in an independent practice for quite a while, and I'm based in East Devon and in Exeter. And so as an independent child and adolescent psychotherapist, I work with families and children from 0 to 25 who have mental health difficulties or behavior difficulties. But my passion is on really about early intervention and parent and baby bonding, so the first few years. I'm also a lecturer at Exeter University, where I run a module on infant observation when you train as a child or sometimes adult psychotherapist. You spend a year observing every week a parent and baby interacting. So you visit the family every week for an hour to observe the beginning of life and the beginning of relationships. And so that's what I teach, and child development. But here we are with Olivia, Sareta and Flavian in a minute to talk about what it is to be a parent in the real world, in a way. A parent who wants to keep their two identities, the parent identity and their work, professional, more social identity, and the struggle or the tension with that. And so, briefly, my thought about this are, on one hand, society kind of idealize parenthood and often really idealize motherhood in a way that I think sometimes not very, very helpful, because on the other hand, society doesn't really want to accommodate the reality of what it is to be a parent, and the big demands that it is, and so parents are torn between this idea that they've entered this period of life where they have to care for these new lives, and especially these days, the idea of bonding, the attachment, and the idea that we have to be with our children all the time, or something catastrophic is going to happen, and the reality that work generally doesn't offer much part-time, much share time, or doesn't, or the the hours are not in tune with the school pickup, for instance, or the holidays. So parents, I know that, when you give birth, you've got a baby, but you also enter the world of guilt, which is part of the job. But I think the workplace kind of increases that guilt in a way that's really not helpful or necessary. And I think so. Today we've got Olivia, Sareta, and Flavian in a minute, and we're going to try to really think about this tension and what can we do about it, or better word, what could be changed so parents could be both the parents they want to be, but also the professionals they want to be. Because one of the things is, a lot in our culture, in our Western culture, we are told to be a professional is important, even for women. That wasn't the case, but we are, educated, and it's hard once you are a mother and a father, but to lose that identity. What do you do with that identity? So I think this is all those little, well, not little, massive things that we're going to talk about. So I will let Sareta, then Olivia and Flavian to introduce themselves, and giving us a sense of their professional, but also their parental identity. So Sareta, do you want to start? You okay with that?
Thank you, and thanks for that intro. So hi everyone, my name's Sareta Puri. My daughter is 18 months old, so I'm fairly new back into work. I took a year off, and actually having a child was not really originally in my life plan for many reasons, and one was actually the really acute knowledge of the impact it would have on my career and my identity. But here I am. So in terms of my role, I work at Sustain, the Alliance for Better Food and Farming. My role is leading a programme on racial justice and equity within the sector. And my job title is Diversity Outreach Coordinator. And the outreach element of that was very much initially designed that I would be like out and about and at events and doing a lot more non-desk based stuff. And the reality has been it's probably been a bit more mixed even before I went on maternity leave. And my career to date before that was a lot of it was very much like out and about, working evenings and weekends. I was a chef for a couple of years. So the impact it might have had at different points is sort of an interesting one to reflect on, and probably part of the reason why I did make a decision to have a child at the sort of later stage that I did. So in terms of my work, so Sustain is a small-ish charity. There's only around 30 people, and actually not many people do work full-time, which is largely due to the nature of funding in the third sector. So I've always been 4 days a week. So coming back wasn't as much of an adjustment in some ways, both financially and time load wise, as it was for some of my friends in other sectors, particularly a lot of my friends that work in corporate environments. However, I did used to use my 5th day for freelance, because for 7 years prior to working at Sustain, I was self-employed, and that's a big part of who I am as in my career. So actually, I have had a hit there, both financially and from me as a professional. And so that's been an interesting one. It's been an interesting one to manage with my partner as well. But the sort of beneficial thing about being in an organization is, even if the benefits were not great, like we're pretty basic maternity package, at least I had something. At least I had a job to come back to, which would be very different than when I was self-employed, where I would be even more questioning myself and my identity. Sustain is led by a female solo parent, so she really does understand the challenges of childcare. And I would say, as an organisation, we do have a decent amount of flexibility. Before I went on maternity leave, I was 50% working at home anyway, and there's an understanding that you'll get the job done when it needs done. And as I mentioned, I'm largely desk-based at the moment, so I can do that from home. I can come into the office like I am now when it sort of suits me, and that definitely helps. My partner's role is a bit more corporate, and he doesn't have the same flexibility, but equally, have I chosen to be more flexible, and is it just the burden because I'm the primary caregiver and I'm the mother and I was the one that had the time off? So I think that's an interesting thing that I'm still like figuring out several months after being back at work. And I think the last thing I wanted to say in this intro is that whilst I did have, that sort of reasonably supportive workplace to come back to, I definitely had lost a sense of self. And for someone who, I'm usually pretty confident in my abilities, but I thought that people didn't want me to come back, that they preferred my maternity cover, and I wasn't up to the job anymore. And I do think that part of pastoral care has been missing. And so whilst there's the flexibility, the wellbeing support might not be there as much. And so being in this panel has really like given me the time to process that and think, was that actually, something that happened? And how would I feel? It's not just about me, it's about everyone within the organisation, within the workforce. And actually, it's been really great to think about this. So yeah, thank you for having me involved.
Sorry. Well, thank you very much, Sareta. Lots of things to think about. So before we dive in, Olivia, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Olivia. I now work at the Soil Association as working in the communication team and a program manager. But prior to this job, I was a farmer for 10 years. And I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old who is now, 5-year-old is now at school. And I work part-time 3 days a week for Soil Association. It's hard to know where to start, and Sareta, you covered lots of really interesting things. So when I went back, when I had my 2 babies, we were farming. First time around when he was born in 2021. It was just me and my husband, and then we had a baby, and we made zero contingency plan for. We thought it would be the same because we had no peer network to ask, hey, what's it like having a baby? You can just carry on, can't you? And, very different to working now in an organization like Sareta and I do. I could take my baby to work. No one minded, and I could work at the hours that suited me. And then second time I had another baby, we also were still running a farm, but the difference was I also had a part-time job at Soil Association and running a farm, but we also had people working for us. So I was joining a new role in an organization and continuing to be a farmer. And there was big things that impacted this that I had never considered, like the impact on my body of having a child, the impact of not sleeping. Depending on how you choose to feed your baby, I chose to breastfeed till they were ready to stop. So, I was up through the night until about 6 months ago, every night, which had a massive impact on my life, and I never considered that. And the difference between my now desk-based role and farming role is that farming is very time pressurized, and it has to be done there. And perhaps your experience, Marie, in the NHS might be similar. Like you can't shut your laptop and do it tomorrow. It has to be done then. And that is a very unforgiving environment to be a child, to have children in, which we struggled with. And we were no longer in a situation where I was a farmer's wife and we had a farmer and I could be at home and homemaking. We needed me to work. So that was a big learning curve. I'll stop there because I can dive more in as we move on into chats. So there's plenty to talk about.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Olivia, for that. Just so I know, has Flavian joined us? Okay, I can't see Flavian on my screen. So Flavian.
I'm here in the woods.
The woods. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, properly in the woods. Very nice to meet you, Flavian. Do you want to tell us a little bit about you and your situation in terms of being a parent and work?
Yeah. So I'm a farmer as well, tenant farmer, and we decided to have a child the same year where we started a farm. And also a few months before, I decided to go self-employed. So yeah, I did it all at once, and I think I think it's the most strain I've had mentally in my life, I'd say. But on the flip side of that, Noah, our son, has been I'd say my lifeline mentally and emotionally the whole time, as well as my wife. Well, yes, so Noah has been a lifeline for her too. So I think without Noah, even in the same situation, I would have struggled way more. So an example of that is having a stressful day at work. You go back home and I hold him and nothing else matters. And from the point I joined where we were saying about sort of people working in corporate and going back to work and how you juggle that, because I'm self-employed now, every plan for me, because Nick is still employed, she does 4 days a week. Every plan for me revolves around Noah. If it doesn't work with Noah, I'm not doing it. And it's just simple as that. And it was quite hard initially to think, oh, I need the money. Then actually, I think I can't get the time back that I don't spend with him to go elsewhere. Like this week, I was supposed to go on a paid course. I can't remember what the company was, and I don't think it's going to fit in my week, so I'm not doing it. And I think that gave me so much clarity. And even when we do markets, we take him with us sometimes. My parents and in-laws always help to look after him. But the juggling aspect, as well as the two ladies I mentioned, Sareta and Olivia before, it's having a kid. And I remember a friend telling me that you have the kid and then things fall into place. You don't sit there like as a farmer when I want to breed a sow. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this. You don't sit there and think, okay, I'm gonna have a kid. I'm gonna do this at month 6, do this at month 12 or whatever. Things just happen, and we didn't really have contingency plans, as it were, before having Noah. And then obviously things like baths don't always go as planned all the time. Nikki had gestational diabetes, and then day 5 Noah was we got told he's got a superpower that is Down syndrome. So having to deal with all that, as well as work the farm and be self-employed and do the marketing and do fencing and have neighbors that don't want you in their land when animals get out, all those things, when it comes down to it, I always say to myself, like in a book I read recently, it's not that deep. And when push comes to shove, so long as Noah's healthy, as long as I'm healthy, as long as Nick is healthy, I couldn't give a shit about anything else, to put it bluntly. I think once I put that in my head, I can go through a brick wall. Yeah.
Well, I guess, I'm sure what you're talking about is this tension, that was the priority, work or the children. And it seems for you, Flavian, you quickly got very clear about what your priorities were. But I don't think it's always that easy. And maybe being self-employed, helped with that. But when you are in a company or charity, when you have other people dependent on you when you work, it's more complicated. And I think Olivia and Sareta, do you want to come in with that, about this tension when your baby is unwell and your boss or your colleagues are asking you to be at that urgent meeting? How do you?
Sure. I mean, that I've definitely chosen my work over my children, and the guilt has eaten me up inside. I mean, for example, my partner went back to work the day after my second child was born, and I was at home with 2 kids while he was out. So because it was spring and we had to get stuff in the ground, and if we missed that window, we didn't have any money or produce when I really needed help, and I was physically not able to look after 2 children. I felt in that moment. So that was still when we were self-employed farmer, and then as a working in a for soil association now, my children have been well. I needed to go to meetings. I have them there. I turn the TV on, which I don't want to do because I have no childcare. And again, I didn't say in the intro, and interesting to hear from you too, Sareta. I know, Flavian, you mentioned you have family. We don't have any family around, so we have no support networks. There is no one else to ask. And it's getting easier as the years go on to stand up for myself. But my oldest is 5. I've been doing this for 5 years, and I still sometimes, and it's not just because my colleagues expect it, it's also that cultural inherited, I need to work, I must work. If I don't work, I'm not valued. So that plays a big part of it.
Yes, I'd like to come back at some point about this sense of self, that shift once you are a mother or a father, and how to but Flavian, you want to come in? You've got
Yes.
your
So I just wanted to not clarify, but elaborate a little bit there. I think what Olivia just said there about the feeling of guilt, I definitely felt that, and that's probably why I've ended up in my mindset now, because now I was in hospital for 3 weeks after being born before coming out, and at the time I had a part-time job as well as the farm. So I was given obviously 2 weeks paternity, but then I still had to go back to the other job, do the farming, and then get hospital. And I felt so guilty because Nikki was there stuck in his 4 walls in a hospital. I could see mentally she was going nuts. You've given birth to a child, you should be excited, but you're here. Then you get these news, you're still processing that, etc., etc. And I think the times where, like, obviously Nikki had 9 months, 9 months maternity, so she was going to like GB regulars and all these things, and I was missing out on that. And the little things like any opportunity I got to change his nappy, I'm excited to change his nappy because you think, I don't change your nappy, come here, you've just done a poo, I'm going to change you. And now he's got a bit older, I take him to the abattoir with me in the truck. I've had to stop sometimes to feed him on the way there, and I think that point Olivia made about the guilt, that is definitely a major factor for my my mindset. And it's a shame that you feel like I've got to go to work to provide for this little thing, but I'm feeling guilty leaving the little thing here to go and earn the money. Even animals, like we've had goats give birth this morning, the mother has to go have grass to make milk to come back and feed it. So, and if you don't have a support network, like Olivia says, like Nikki went away for 2 weeks with work to Indonesia, and the first week I was on my own. He had nursery, etc. My mum came and stayed with me for a week. Single parents, honestly, they need to be treated like gods, because, oh my God, unbelievable. So yeah, it's an extreme sport being a parent.
Because that's the reality these days, is that it's very much nuclear families. We're quite young parents are often isolated, far from their families, and the communities. Yeah, we tend to parent very much on our own, and that adds to the strain. But I wanted to come back to Olivia, those 2 things about when you had your first child, you thought that nothing, you didn't need to make any plan. But I think that's again this kind of, when we idealize things, parenthood, idealization is a kind of defense in our psychoanalytic world. That's how we idealization and demonization are two extreme. And when you go into the extreme, those are defenses. So we're not seeing the reality. And but that's very much how society looks at parenthood, as you know, you have a baby and oh, it's all marvelous, but really we don't want to hear about any of the problem that comes with it. You know, it has to be clean and tidy and orderly, when parenting is very messy. And you know, that's the nature of parenting. And if your parenting is not messy, I'm not sure it's real. You know, that's from the messiness, the kind of tension, the mistake we make and the repair we do, that comes our humanity and the richness of our bond with our children. But society doesn't want that. They want to, you know, I talk quite a lot in my book and in my work about the birth and the big problem around birth in our society, where again it's idealized but also disconnected from the reality, and as how the mother is seen as just a body and not as a psychological being. And the birth is seen, if your baby, if you know, if by the end of the birthing process you were alive and your baby is alive physically, you know, then please don't make any complaints. We're not looking at the psychological impact of birth, which is huge. And so all those disconnection makes the entry into parenthood a massive shock. And leaves parents, you know, I think that Sareta, you were talking about this sense of self, that how do you regain a sense of self when society doesn't want to hear about your sense of self as a parent? You know, when you go back to work, it's quite rare that people are interested in the number of feed or what formula you're using or what nappy, or, you know, when actually, or even, you know, more importantly, how do you feel about your baby? And again, you know, often people want to hear all the loving feelings about our babies, but what about the not so loving? Because, you know, if you love someone, you also dislike them sometimes. You can't just be in the ideal and the love. There is also the hate somewhere. And again, you know, all this is pushed to the side. And I've spoken a lot, so I don't know, Sareta, do you want to come in about the sense of self, how difficult it is to get the professionals, our professional identity alongside our maternal identity?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because for me, I've chosen what I do or don't bring into the workplace. And I don't want to talk about feeding and nappies and stuff when I come to work, but the mental impact is something that I think is missing, and the check-ins beyond the you've had a keeping in touch day or you're back to work, like actually just like, you know, how are you dealing with limited sleep? How are you dealing with the mental burden of like having like tantrums of a toddler? How are you dealing with thinking about your family's income? How are you dealing with like issues that might be going on at nursery, you know? And I think that bit, whilst, you know, so individual, because it's like, where is your sort of private self and what do you want to keep private? But I think that everyone kind of needs to be offered the space for that. And I think that's definitely what's missing. And I think, you know, during the sort of postpartum time, there's you know, you get your ad hoc health visitor and midwife come and visit you, but there isn't much goes beyond that, and those appointments were not very useful. There might be networks that you can join, but quite often there's a cost to them. I know there was something in my area about well-being. You know, where's the support for like everybody that might need it? But then that's only offered, like some of these groups that I know of were like whilst you're on maternity leave, but actually what support is there out there beyond that? And I think organisations have a duty of care to be signposting, and be it something like there's counselling or employee assistant programme, or we can pay for you to have X, Y, and Z that upkeeps your well-being. I think that part of it, beyond the it's okay if you leave at this time to pick up your child, or let me know what's going on when they're sick, because I think anything that's a bit fuzzy and woolly for someone like me, I'm not gonna like ask for that support. I need someone to like actually like be outwardly supportive to me, because I'm not one to ask for help.
So the idea that you know, the HR of the company, you know, it's a given that parents will need some mental health, you know, well-being support, that you don't have to ask.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
Olivia, do you want to come in, of Flavian?
I agree with all of that, what Sareta was saying, obviously. I think greater awareness, what you were saying, Marie, about the messiness of parenthood, like other employees that don't have children or even have older children have forgotten, because it's a beautiful thing, the memory lapse of what it's like, to just reminding what a stressful time it is. And I think a really important part is recognizing that it doesn't fit in a box like work hours, and how we can accommodate for that is that, is that a much more phased return, and acknowledging that children are probably going to be quite sick in their first couple of years. Is it acknowledging that this is a season of life, not just 9 months and then you're back to normal, or is it actually 5? Is it to the end of key stage 1, which is about age 7, where you really needed to be around a lot? And how can you do that without impacting on generally women's career and pay packet? Because more than often than not, I see it as being the mother that's making that sacrifice for the lower wage, less hours. And how can we make that fair amongst people that don't have children as well? I don't have any questions. It's lots of thought. I'm sorry, I don't have any answers. It's lots of questions and thoughts.
Yeah. Sareta, you saying, oops, it's gone, but 42% drop in income for women coming back to work, which is huge. And Flavian, you were talking about single parents. If that's what single parent, mother have to, it means how. And we have to think that all this is going to impact on how we relate to our children, because the mental space that one needs to, it takes to have those anxiety about work, about finance, about, it's availability that we don't have for our children. Flavian, do you want to come in, looking at the...
I think and obviously talking about this as a dad, there's only so much I can say or do to support, because I can't. And I've said to Nikki during the time of getting close to having Noah, that if men had to be pregnant and have kids, the population will be 50%. I swear, because I know as a guy what I'm like. Not even talking about pain threshold, because mine is stupidly low. But the way society is, and even hearing, I remember having a line manager who were at my house with Nikki stood next to me. He said how he wouldn't employ a lady that was pregnant because they're going to take maternity leave. And Nikki, quick as anything, turned around and said, has your wife just given birth? And he always used to rave at us how good his wife's bosses were at letting his wife work from home, kept her pay full the whole time, how good they were to her. And here he is, like an empty head, saying how he wouldn't employ a woman that was pregnant because she was going to take maternity leave. And even going to things like conferences in our industry, agriculture. Why don't all of them have creches? And I remember asking the question, and I was told, well, we can't have everything. And I'm like, hang on, a creche should be as under the necessities as a toilet. Because if you're going to have these conferences and you want to have diverse thinking in the industry, brackets, they don't. You want to have diverse thinking in the industry beyond race, because that's the one that people always go heavy on. Beyond that, facilitate for people to bring their kids there, have a creche. And I think one of the conferences has a creche. I thought that was amazing when I saw that. Facilitate people that have young kids to come to these conferences, because if you're going to have an event that takes place at these hours and someone can't pay for childcare, which is unbelievably expensive, which again, you don't know that until you have a child. And I think parenting, by the time you have a child, you almost read like page 1 to 5 of a book that has probably 1,000,000 pages, and you're finding all these things out as you go along. So I think it's almost like, and maybe I'm cynical, it's almost like the system doesn't want to make these things easy for people. And when you look at some of the organizations, the people at the top that complain about people taking maternity leave and the cost of paying people for maternity, I always ask myself this question: did you fall from a tree, or were you born as well? And when you were born, who dealt with that? So it's as if someone came out of, I don't know, you sprouted out the ground, then you can complain about paying maternity. But if you were born as well and your parents went through the same thing, you should be empathetic enough. But I guess humans are allegedly the most intelligent species, but most of the things we do are not very intelligent. So I don't know where we get how this is going to change, or when it will change, if it does. But a lot needs to be done, and I think dads should definitely speak up a bit more. And I know some companies do shared paternity. Like I've got friends where they could split the paternity, but ultimately the company never loses. The company never ever loses. It's always the parents.
Yeah, I think if dads take an extended paternity, often their salary or their position, will be, and their position in the company will be more fragile. Yeah. Maybe we're going to open to the floor or to the screen.
Could I just add on what Flavian was saying there? Just, for example, I said that my partner doesn't. He's self-employed, but at a publishing house, and so he took 2 weeks off unpaid, and the sort of perception is that it's not a very family-friendly stroke, particularly if you're a man, workplace. But I think that then seeps into other parts of society that then perpetuate that. So, for example, my daughter has to be registered at my GP because I'm her mother. So that means I do all the doctor's appointments, even just the way that like the nursery will communicate with you and so on. There's so many things that become the default of the primary caregiver, where in a heteronormative relationship, that is a woman. And then therefore you're the one that's just more quickly going to respond to things, or be more likely to say, well, I'll take time off work, or I'll adjust my work pattern, because it just becomes expected. So I think it's, whilst our workplaces have got a lot to answer for, it's sadly much broader than that.
And just, Olivia, I know you've got your hand, but a little bit what you said, you came into parenthood not prepared, Olivia. And maybe that's also, all those things are not really talked about. And a lot of, including myself, went into parenthood not really thinking about what it meant at many different levels. And I think very few couples have actually do have those conversations. And I think, if we did, I think things, I think, Sareta, you're right. It also needs to change at our individual level or couple level, where we need to have those conversations about, that the mother is not going to be the primary carer by default, and how you're going to negotiate those things. But Olivia, yes.
Sorry, you've distracted me with that point, which I think is very important, because I think there's this, I've read it in other books as well about this, like, why did no one tell me this great secret of actually how hard this is, and why we're not talking about it? And even to the people that did talk to me about it, everyone sort of sugarcoats it, I suppose, so that it doesn't seem as hard. And then equally, I do the same thing with people who have a newborn baby, and they're telling me how hard it is, and I'm like, it actually just gets harder and harder and harder, but in a different way. Easier in some ways, but perhaps emotionally more draining, or financially more draining, whatever it may be. So and the other thing, that when I was having these harder conversations before my first was born, I was like, oh, well, that's not going to be me. I can still work and do it. I will be fine. And I don't know where this comes from, this expectation. And I mean, it all circles back to this, like, lack of respect for motherhood and parenting, not just motherhood alone, lack of respect for it being a role. And I don't necessarily want to see it paid, because it's out of love. It's not for money that I'm doing it. But it's just that seeing it as a full-time job, as probably most of us have seen the stats around how many hours you are a parent a week, and which is 100% of the time but the jobs you're doing. So I've forgotten the point I was going to come back to on what was said earlier, but that was my piece on what you just said.
Sorry, Olivia.
That's all okay.
Flavian, you got your 2 hands raised.
Yeah. Oh, is it 2 hands?
No, there's a number 2 next to your hand.
Oh,
so.
sorry. It's so hard to hold on to a point when you raise your hand. When Olivia was talking, I'm just grasping at the point. I've got 2 points to make. One is the thing about not being prepared. I remember when we were expecting Noah, we were at a family event, and it was about a month away from him being born, and my cousins were sort of asking, "Oh, are you prepared?" I said, "You know what? I think Noah is just gonna fit into our life." And I remember to this day the laugh that everyone expressed for about 5 minutes, looking at me like, "What's this guy talking about?" I'll never forget that, because they were sort of laughing at me like, you have no idea what you're talking about. And I didn't, because I definitely don't fit into his life. Oh, he doesn't fit into ours. I definitely fit into his. And the second point is the bit about like the societal expectation. And I remember talking to my dad just generally about life, and in his sort of true African form of sort of anecdotes, he was saying, we were talking about how some relatives back home, you start a family without thinking, and suddenly you think, oh, I've got all these things that cost now. Message someone that's abroad, oh, can you help me this, help me with that? And Dad was like, I don't understand how people have to go to college or uni to get degrees on how to be a farmer or how to breed animals. And yeah, no one goes to school to learn how to start a family. Humans just start a family, and you're like, oh, okay, this is what I've got to do. And it's got an interesting take on that. Again, back to the whole thing, now we're the most intelligent species. There's things that we do that maybe we probably need to take a step back. And it's easy to say, obviously, to take a step back and sort of work things out. But back to my friend who said to me, it's never the right. Well, she said to me, she's a few years younger than me, and she had a child, her first kid, at 21. She said, there's never a right time to have a child. And I never understood it when she told me before. But you have a child, you think things are going to go a particular way, and they go a different way. So, and especially the way as volatile as the world is at the moment, you definitely could probably plan a week ahead, depending on what president says what or tweets what, could change your plans very dramatically the next week. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm aware I was supposed to open for to questions, and I haven't done that. So, Miranda, do you want to help me with how do I do that?
Sure. I mean, people are very welcome to use the hands up function, or if you had, I mean, thanks very much for the chats. That's really interesting in the chat. But if you had particular questions, Q&A, or the chat, I will help Marie keep an eye on that.
I know
Angelina.
that oh yeah, Angelina.
Yeah, I guess my question is for Flav, because I think, society is sort of built around the construct that the woman is the primary caregiver. And as a result, I think a lot of times we alienate men from the parental roles. I mean, I put in the comment box about the school always calls me first when there's a problem with the kids at school. And in fact, my husband has gotten quite upset sometimes, like, well, how come I didn't know about this? How come they didn't call me? And I share with him, I'm like, yeah, why don't they call you? Like, you can deal with these problems too. And I just wonder what your experience from that perspective is, Flav. And if you feel like if you have experienced that or not.
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm just running to a charger. But I'm going to answer you in 2 seconds.
And I guess it has come up. I can elaborate while you find your charger. It's come up in the Swedish context because I was living in Sweden when I had my babies, and there it's quite a different system of parental leave, and men often do take quite extended parental leave. But I heard from a number of male friends how they feel discriminated against. They don't get invited to the mommy and baby groups, and they're sort of on the outside of those social circles. Like, we have all of these mommy and baby kind of groups, but men don't really get invited into those spaces.
Oh, thanks for that. I caught my breath now. Yeah, I think it is a little bit frustrating. But then, and I've had to work hard at this because I've got quite a strong mum. My sister also puts me right very quickly, often. Nikki is the same, strong woman, and I've got a lot of friends that are the same. So as a guy, I've had to be conscious that thought of, oh, what about men? And it's there. Like, a lot of guys will deny it, but it's always there. Like, even yesterday was International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day to all the women in here. But you sort of hear guys, oh, what about us? So because of that, I tend not to go too much about how I feel. Let's say if the nursery call and they're messaging Nikki, not me, or let's say you go to an appointment and the doctor's talking to the mother instead of me. So yeah, I think I know it happens. It makes you feel a certain type of way, but I suppress that feeling because of the way society is, and the fact that I'd like society to be less, and I'm gonna mess this word up, less patriarchal. Is that a word? Yeah, I'd like society to be less patriarchal, so I don't focus on that, because if I did, then it would just take away from the actual issue of, okay, if no one is taken from school because he's ill and Nikki's working, I'm in the middle of a field feeding a pig. Give me 10 minutes, I'll come over because the nursery's not far away. And I think sometimes if it's a situation where I feel a particular type of way, I'll say it there and then. So, like, if let's say Noah has to go to physio because of low muscle tone, when Nikki was on maternity leave, she'd do all that or take him to all the the mothers. Like, I remember going to the first I can't remember what it was called, Sing and Sign. I was the only dad there. Obviously the dads are working. And yeah, luckily one of the ladies from our NCT group was there, so I didn't feel too left out. But you can see that the way society is, even going to like the coffee mornings at Portsmouth Down Syndrome Association, it's mostly always mothers. Luckily, in our early development group where I take Noah with the other kid, it's me and the other dad, Tim. So that feels so good to see other dads getting involved as well. But I think, again, with the way the system is, the way society is, because mothers are seen as the primary caregiver, and there are exceptions where the dad is at home and the mother goes to work. Like in our situation, if I was to break my leg, we'll be relying on Nikki's wage because obviously I'm self-employed. So I've had to learn, let's say, if now I need something and Nikki's gone to Brighton to work, I've got to sort it out. And I like that because I'm quite a self-sufficient person. So like when Nikki was in Indonesia, I couldn't ring her up and say, oh, what do I do here? Because we're a different time zone. She was on a cruise in the middle of the ocean, so it didn't have signal. So moments like that, I enjoy because I'm like, actually, I could be a parent. I could do all these things. So that when now I was older, okay, looking back, I think, oh, do you remember that day you woke me up at 3 in the morning and you didn't want to eat, and I had to wake up at 6 to go move the animals, etc., etc., etc. So yeah, to answer your question, the feeling of almost being sidelined is there. It's annoying at the start, definitely. I didn't know how to deal with it. It used to annoy me so much. So oh, how's the mother doing? Obviously, the mother's carried the baby for 9 months. If you've had a C-section, 6 or 7 different layers of muscle have been cut up. And then they're only sending you home with ibuprofen and paracetamol, which I could not believe. I was like, if that was me, I would have needed morphine in my veins for about a month. And so little bits like that used to annoy me at this. Or even somehow some of the nurses used to talk to Nikki. Like on day 3, Nikki had to go to NICU to see Noah, and then she asked for assistance, and the nurse said, oh, it's day 3 now, you should be walking around, there's stitches, that's how you heal. And I was like, I wasn't there, and I said, if I was there, we would have been getting kicked out of that hospital because I would have lost it. And so I don't know, maybe it's because of being a parent, you just become so protective, and tiny comments like that just trigger you to a different level. But as Noah's got older, I've had to learn to hear something, process it, and then react. Obviously, sometimes I'm gonna be trigger happy and just shoot from the hip because I'm a parent. But yeah, it's definitely there, and I've created coping mechanisms in my head to deal with it.
Well, thank you, Flavian. I can see Miranda's put her hand up. I think it's about the timing. Yes, you'd like.
I mean, I had a quick kind of question as well, but no, we don't have much time left, and especially if everybody's going to come in with a thought. But just on that, obviously what you just said, Flavian, about those comments being really enraging, I can imagine this is a really stressful time. Everybody's tired and stressed. And I'm just wondering if anybody had a particularly positive experience of in the workplace in particular, or any other kind of scenario where you were really liked people's attitude and thought that's a really useful perspective, or something along those lines, a positive experience in a workplace of it being inclusive.
When I came back to work, I had a different manager at the time, and who was, a parent themselves, and very much was like, you take the time you need and make sure that your schedule is working for you. And I really felt that and welcomed that, because I don't think everybody would have that experience.
For me, going back and self-employed, from a positive perspective, it made us tidy our act up, because we had this other responsibility. We hired staff that we needed to help us cover. We sorted out our systems. We made sure that we had a mat leave for the second time around. So it helped us improve the way we worked, so we could be parents and responsibilities. And then my experience at Soil Association is the same as Sareta. People are so open to you taking the time you need, but that doesn't reduce the guilt that not being there when your colleagues are.
Mm, mm, mm. I think Sophie wants to come in.
I sort of had a slightly separate question, but I realised, just looked at the time and I realised it's kind of slightly depthy, so happy to not ask it if we haven't time and stuff. Should I just go for it or? So it was kind of picking up on something between Sareta, Olivia, and Flav around how culture views parenting, because Olivia, I think you mentioned something about motherhood being viewed as a full-time job, and I just find that really interesting in terms of how if something's not obviously productive, it's not necessarily valued. So I was just wondering if we could sort of talk a little bit about that, kind of where culturally do we think motherhood sits?
I suppose my main quick take on that would be that no matter sort of culturally where we think it sits, we're operating within a capitalist system where all of the processes are trying to get women back into the workplace. And I do not know many women that are stay-at-home parents or full-time parents, and that's largely because people enjoy working. But I think we've moved on so much that if you did want to do that, it's almost demonized in many ways. And I look at, for example, my family in India, when the women have children there, my family are farmers, so the women are carrying those small, tiny children and going down to the fields and getting the milk, and they are working because that's just kind of the norm there. They don't have things like maternity leave, but it's just a very different system that they live in than what I do here.
I think it's also partly because our capitalist society doesn't really value, what it is, the caring role, what a mother and a father, or the parents, whatever their gender, does with a baby. They're building, in a way, a human being, which should be, it's the core for our society. And if, especially the first 2 years, we know how, with neuroscience these days, we know impact on the brain and the latter, the impact on the mental health later on in life and physical health, of the early years. But there is, society doesn't understand that the bonding between the parents and the baby is what's going to make this baby a grown up, and an emotional being. And someone was talking about, Flavian, you were talking about how at school, there isn't parenting classes, but there isn't even, our kids, and we were at school, we learned about biology, about cells and what happened between cells. We never learn about emotion, relationship, what happened between two people when they interact, which again, this is the core for society. We are social being, but this is completely ignored. And be interesting, another workshop to try to think about why, but it's too complicated to start this conversation now, when I know we need to finish in a couple of minutes. But Flavian, I can see you've got your hand raised. So
Yeah. On the cultural point, Sophie, it's interesting situation because Nikki's English and obviously I'm Kenyan, and Nikki's mum actually she retired, or she quit her job to help Nikki's younger brother look after their child, and then she went back to work after. So I've not really had that happen in many situations, and they're not rich. Like my father-in-law was a plumber, so they're got a roof over their head, so they're essentially sort of working class. So I think I probably know a handful of people who have partners that are stay-at-home mums, but you need money. Their husband needs to be earning serious money, or if you've got serious reserves to do that. I think another point on the cultural one is whenever we ask my mother-in-law, Nikki's mum, to look after Noah, it's almost like, I know she'd always help, but it's almost always like, oh, how do I feel? Where's my mum? I'm like, Mum, this is your grandson. It's your job. So with that saying it like that, obviously, I'll be like, Mum, can you have Noah next week? Because we've got 2 markets. Like yesterday, Nikki had a market here. I was in Kensington. So we took Noah to London with us on Saturday to Notting Hill Market. On the way back, we dropped him off at my mum's to stay with my mum overnight on Sunday. Nikki went to market near home on Sunday. I was in Kensington. On the way back, picked Noah up. And if we had the money, my mum would quit her job and I'd pay my mum to look after Noah full time. And she would do that until she dies, without question. So, but then I think like English culture is always that thought of, but I've got these other things to do. And that's my experience anyway. And Nikki always sometimes says that about her mum, where her mum quit her job for her younger brother, but when Noah was born, she's like, I think having Noah 2 days a week might be too much. Maybe we'll do 1 day, which again, it's not her child, so it's fine. But I think Kenyan culture, like my mum would quit her job and do everything for Noah until she couldn't anymore at a drop of a hat. So I guess that's the cultural difference. Not saying one is bad and one is good, but that's the differences that exist that I see.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You've sort of just flashed up a memory there because I remember my mother-in-law being really slightly prickly about looking after my niece when she was very little. And I was kind of shocked by this as well because it's similar to yours in my culture. It's kind of like there's almost an expectation for grandparents to just be involved. Like it wouldn't even be a question.
I'm aware of the time, and so Miranda, do you want us to conclude, or how do you want to do that?
I think if anybody's got anything that they do want to come in to say anything, including you, Marie, then do. If not, that was a really good conversation. Anjali is just asking for a couple of points in the chat.
Well, someone was who I think has had to leave was saying the top 2 strategy tips about to overcome mother's guilt. So
I think that we're getting some answers there in the chat box, which might be a quicker way to help us answer the question and also finish up the webinar, knowing that people may need to leave for other commitments.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. And, best of luck with managing parenting and work.
Thank you for facilitating.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us.